When you play the Game of Thrones, you
subscribe and like,
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube and welcome back to the Grease Goblins YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the life of Otto Hightower. So similar to the video I did last week with Rhaenyra, we're going to be kind of going through Otto's life and talking about kind of his achievements, his failures, and just overall what he did in his life. So if you guys like to see more content like that, like, you know, with just breakdowns of characters within the Dance of Dragons history, kind of just kind of preparing for House of the Dragons, which hopefully we'll see by some point in this year. But if you guys have another character you would like me to do, I already have Daemon, and also I'm going to do Allison playing in the future. If there's somebody else during this period you'd like me to talk about, let me know down in the comments. I do look at them and try to like as many of your guys' comments as I can. I haven't had as much time as I, have to be able to, do thoughtful comments and in responses to a lot of your guys' stuff. Just with trying to upload videos, school, and work. So yeah. Sorry about that, but I will definitely look at all of them if you do suggest some in the comments. Now, before we get into the video, if you guys like to like, subscribe, and comment for more of this type of content, please do. Helps channel reach other people that might like this content as well. And yeah, let's get into the video. So Otto Hightower, we actually don't know a lot about his early life. He is raised at Old Town, and then he comes to court later on. As we're going to talk about in this video, Otto really, his main first big seat of power is he becomes the hand of the king for Jaehaerys in about the last 2 years of his life. Now, this is mainly because Jaehaerys at this point wasn't really ruling. He was way later in his life. Otto Hightower really became kind of the king almost at this point. And we'll see this kind of as we go on in the future. This kind of is a reoccurring theme. And I also want to point out in this video that I think Otto Hightower has a lot of similarities with Tywin and how he handles kind of political maneuvering and war in general. So I do want to point that out so you guys can kind of see as I'm talking kind of the things that they kind of have as the same qualities, right? And I'll try to talk about them as we get into the video and specific things. But yeah. So the other big thing when Otto comes into the hand of the king, he brings his daughter, Allison. Now, this is a really smart move. This is exactly what Tywin does when, he goes to be the hand of the king for Viserys, and, eventually he gets married and has kids and all that. He brings Cersei to kind of mingle a little bit, and eventually he wants to propose that marriage of Cersei with Rhaegar. And this is kind of what I believe Otto was doing, and he was kind of forward thinking, right? Because Allison would have been in a good position. She was described as being very beautiful and would have been in a position to where she could have gotten to know Viserys, who was going to be the next heir. Now, as we continue, eventually Viserys gets chosen as the next king, right? That's kind of how that goes. And there was kind of a meeting which then led to Viserys becoming the king over Rhaenys. And Viserys has a wife at this point, so he is married, right? So again, that doesn't come into play yet, but it's just something I would like to note as we get deeper into this. Now, again, like I said, Otto will continue to be hand for Viserys for quite a bit, and then we'll see a break, and I'll kind of talk about that in a little bit, though. Something that I do want to talk about at this point is that Otto Hightower and Daemon Targaryen did not really like each other. I've talked about this in a lot of videos where Otto Hightower, there's not a lot of reasoning for why he doesn't like Daemon. There's a rumor that Allison had actually slept with Daemon, which is a big one, taking her maidenhead and stuff like that. As well as we know, Daemon was kind of this flamboyant, kind of arrogant type of personality. And I have this whole idea where I don't want to get into it too much in this video because I don't want this to be a Maester conspiracy video. I've done those in the past, so if you want to do that, I think it's one of my best series I've ever done on the channel. So if you want to look at that, I would recommend that series if you want to hear me talk about more in depth of why I don't think Otto Hightower and Daemon like each other, or specifically Otto. Now, Otto more or less, I think, doesn't like Daemon because I think he's kind of in league with the Maesters and trying to get rid of the dragons and limit the power of the Targaryens, in my opinion. And I think he figures the best way to do that is you become hand of the king, you get your family married into the Targaryens as well. And Daemon's kind of the good warrior. He's a big dragon rider. He's someone you don't want to become king if you're looking at it from Otto's eyes or the Maester's eyes, right? Now, I'm going to kind of get through that, right? And that's kind of the basic just reasoning for why the two don't really like each other on Otto's side of it. Daemon doesn't like Otto because, for one, Otto continuously tries to get Daemon removed from offices, just removed from the city, all this type of stuff. And, you know, as we'll talk about, right, Daemon at first was named Master of Coin. Otto gets Viserys to remove him from that. Next, Daemon is named Master of Law. And Otto kind of really hates this decision and kind of gets him to get rid of him as well. He was also kind of the commander of basically the city watch at this point. So again, another big no-no for Otto, because again, you're giving all these forces to Daemon, someone he does not like. So eventually, he pretty much gets Daemon out of that role as well. Now, something that I think is very important to talk about at this point is that Otto hated Daemon so much that he actually favored Rhaenyra at this point, because we'll see later on he actually flips and says, oh, the female heir doesn't matter when there's a male heir, when at this point of his life he actually believed the opposite. He went along with what Viserys had wanted. So that is something that's key to remember in talking about people's political motivations, sorry, and all that going on. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is kind of how Allison gets married to Viserys. So I think this is, again, really good maneuvering by Otto, where he puts Allison in a place at court, somewhere where she will interact with Viserys, or at least, you know, catch his eye. And the next weirdest part is when when Viserys' wife dies, right? The whole idea here is we got to get Viserys still to be married, right? He only has one heir, being Rhaenyra. He's definitely young enough to marry again. And the weirdest thing here is that their first and only real recommendation to Viserys is a very young girl, right? Like, you know, 12, something just unfathomable, right? And then the only other option, you know, Otto, you know, slyly comes in and he goes, what about my daughter, Allison? And it's just like, they give him two options. It's like, are you going to pick the girl that's, you know, she's gone through puberty and all that and is described as being very attractive, or the little girl? Like, it's a very obvious situation where Viserys is going to pick Allison. And we know Viserys as a king was someone that was very easy to manipulate, and he was kind of someone that you could push around very easily. Another reason why Daemon didn't like Otto was because of that. Daemon, I feel like, felt like Otto was kind of pushing Viserys to do all these things, which he was. But that's another thing. That's another basically reason why the two just did not like each other. And Viserys, again, falls into this trap. He goes with Alicent. And Otto, very good political maneuvering, right? He's just like that, right? Targaryens who more than likely always marry into their own family, marry into the Hightowers. Great political move by Otto Hightower. He gets himself to be in a very powerful position as well, being the hand of the king, and his daughter is now married to the king. Now, this is where I think a lot of Otto Hightower kind of flips on his political, like, I feel like his political views to the public, right? Where he supported Rhaenyra, that's going to flip. Now, after Alicent and Viserys had a few kids, we're kind of skipping a little bit into their relationship. The next big thing Otto is involved in is Otto Hightower and Viserys kind of get into this big argument where Otto can realistically almost get Viserys to do almost anything he wants, really, except for one thing. Viserys always had said, no matter when anyone asked him, that Rhaenyra was his heir, right? Rhaenyra had been trained to do this. You know, Viserys basically considered Rhaenyra his heir already, right? She was always attending these council meetings and stuff like that. The public loved her. So basically Otto goes, hey, I know you like Rhaenyra and all, but your children with Alicent, right? They should be the heirs. And they basically get into this argument, as well as things about like Daemon and stuff. And basically Otto is stripped of his title of Hand of the King. And we actually don't see him for quite a while. After he is removed from Hand of the King, he goes back to Old Town. And we don't see him for, I believe, 11 years. In those 11 years, Lionel Strong is serving as the Hand of the King, who does eventually die. Soon after Otto is made, you know, hand and comes back, Viserys actually dies. Now, Otto is a very key figure. He's one of the three main key figures at the kind of Green Council we see right after Viserys' death. And Otto, you can definitely tell his political maneuvering here, where he once believed or publicly stated that Rhaenyra was the heir, right? No matter, you know, the male claiming it with, you know, Daemon, goes, Aegon II should be the king. Now, what does that remind you of, right? It's not the honorable thing to do. It's the thing that gains this character more power, right? And this is a Tywin type move. Otto Hightower sees that, okay, we can put Allison's kids, you know, on the throne, and we can just say, screw Rhaenyra's claim, right? And that's basically what ends up happening at this council. And when we get into the Dance of the Dragons, which is, I think, a really big thing, Otto Hightower really gets kind of overlooked by Aegon II, in my opinion, because Otto Hightower was kind of doing what Tywin does, right? Tywin believed to a certain degree that, yes, armies do win wars and stuff like that, but I think Tywin realized the idea of making alliances, writing these letters, trying to see who you can get to come to your side, and create a lot of this power vacuum that makes you stronger and makes your enemies weaker, right? And this is what Otto Hightower was trying to do in the early stages of the war, right? Otto was trying to get the kingdoms of the three daughters who Daemon had been warring with during this point, before, previously, earlier on, when he had been banished or he'd left King's Landing. And these were enemies of Daemon, and Otto was basically saying, okay, you know, you guys should, you know, help us out, we'll help you out, you know, scratch each other's backs and all that. And this is actually a key maneuver that doesn't see, it doesn't impact right away, and Aegon II doesn't see any progress being made, and he actually removes Otto as the Hand of the King, which in my opinion, a very stupid move. He moves Kristen Cole into the role, and Kristen Cole, being very arrogant and not really, I think, a thinker, in my opinion, goes along with Aegon II, and this is how Rhaenyra is basically able to capture King's Landing. Because what Kristen Cole and Aegon II and Aemont, which is Aegon II's younger brother, they decide, okay, let's take our forces out and meet Daemon at Harrenhal, or at least go onto the field, right, and start being a little bit more aggressive. And this is a bad move, because they take the dragon away from King's Landing, they take a majority of their forces out of King's Landing, and everything Otto Hightower had been building to at this point was working, right? It's just you didn't see it yet. It's very much like Tywin in the main story, when you're seeing him making these letters, and he's at King's Landing, and he feels very relaxed while, you know, Robb is doing his stuff in the West and all that, is because Tywin had a plan, and I think Otto definitely had a plan. As we see later on, you know, this is a bit after Otto is, you know, not in the Hand of the King anymore, but we see that the kingdoms of the three daughters actually were very crucial in breaking the Velaryon blockade, which was huge. It was cutting off a lot of the resources to King's Landing, as well as to the armies as well, and it was really, you know, big, right? This was part of the Battle of the Gullet. So yeah, very key influential move that was one of the bigger reasons why the Blacks started to lose the war. Now, with this being said, he also did fail to secure an alliance with Dorne, which I can't really fault him too much with, as Dorne was kind of their own independent kingdom at this point. They weren't part of the Seven Kingdoms yet. And also, the Dornish and the Targaryens really did not have a great, I guess, history, especially up to this point. So yeah, that one was unsuccessful. But the last part of Otto's life is realistically when Rhaenyra comes in to retake the city. And realistically, what are you going to do if you're Otto? He's the first person beheaded as being a traitor. He did not go with Viserys on making Rhaenyra the heir, and so Rhaenyra beheads him. And that is the life of Otto Hightower. It's a weird life because he sets up his family in such great positions, and his family just throws it away. If you look at Allison's children, right, they're basically extinct very shortly after the Dance of the Dragons. Aegon II only makes it a little bit, but he does so bad as king that his own counselors basically kill him. And realistically, his own line only survives through Aegon III's wife. I'm kind of forgetting her name. She's always very forgetful for me. But more or less, Otto Hightower reminds me a lot of Tywin, because Tywin is always setting up his family in the greatest position, and Otto Hightower did the same thing. And it's even overlooked by a lot of people, like Joffrey. Joffrey is someone that makes a lot of sense when it comes to Joffrey just doesn't understand what Tywin's doing. I feel like Aegon the Second, where he was nowhere near as cruel and such as Joffrey, but Aegon the Second kind of acts a lot like how Joffrey would in that situation. So I think a lot of great parallels between Otto Hightower and his character like Tywin. Now, Tywin was a lot better at, you know, all the maneuvering and stuff like that, but Otto Hightower definitely deserves a shout out. He did a really good job. With that all being said, Otto Hightower is one of my least favorite characters, just because I am someone that really likes Rhaenyra. She's definitely one of my favorite characters within all the histories as well as the main story. But yeah, no, Otto Hightower, I just don't like you for going against Viserys for making Rhaenyra the heir, and that's mainly it. And I think you're in league with the Maesters, so But I hope you guys all enjoyed the video. Let me know if you guys do want to see more of these kind of character reviews of, you know, characters in the past. I could even do this for characters in this current story if you wanted me to. I just don't like doing that because we don't know where the character's going to go yet. So I feel like it's almost like 50% like, oh, telling the story of their character up to this point and then doing the prediction after. And I've done so many prediction videos up to this point on almost all the characters at this point, or at least the main ones and a lot of the major minor characters. But yeah, let me know what you guys want to see, and I will see you guys all in the next video. Bye, guys.
If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.